I have Bernadette Joy on. Bernadette is a coach who empowers women to live a more financially advantageous life. And I'm so excited to have her on to learn more about her journey and how she was able to obtain her success. So, Bernadette, can you please do us the favor of introducing yourself to the audience and describing your story? Yeah.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Bernadette Joy. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a first generation Filipino-American. I am on schedule to retire by 40. I am 39 today, so
Oh,
days in a couple of months in February. And I just am a self-proclaimed personal finance nerd. I taught myself a lot of things just from listening to podcasts like yours and trying to soak up all the things that I could find, but then actually go and implement them. And I will be releasing my first book, Crush Your Money Goals, in December to
wow.
share basically everything that I've learned in terms of the smart money habits that have helped me become a debt-free millionaire. I will be covering in that book, so anyone can can get all of the things, all of my secrets for like $8.
Wow. Ah, okay. Wow. That's awesome. And so I'm curious, first of all, are you yourself a debt free millionaire?
Mhm.
Wow. That's awesome. Congratulations. I think that's
Yeah,
something.
my husband and I have a joint net worth of $1.7 million. We have no
Wow.
debt at all, and we've been debt free for about um, 3 years if you exclude the mortgage, and then we've been debt free, including paying off our home, since like 2021.
Wow. So, you mentioned you mentioned you want to retire at the age of 40. I'm just curious, why 40? Cuz I don't that's not really a typical number I hear. Usually
Mhm.
when people talk about retirement it's much older or what, like 65 is the age. What made you want to retire at 40?
I'm tired. I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm 39. I've been working, since during college. I was raised in the first generation, a Filipino family that said, you have to work hard to
Yeah.
be able to afford the things that you want. And I've done that. I've worked really hard for, over 20 years as an adult. I would argue that I was working pretty hard as a kid in terms of like, trying to get good grades and getting myself to go to a good college and all of that. And so I don't know, like I feel like if the lifespan of people are like into their 80s, and I think half of my life working hard is plenty. But um, specifically, my husband and I also, we've been having some deep dive conversations recently of, well, what is even retirement? And, everyone has their own definitions of retirement. A lot of people think of, just two old people like sitting on a beach and drinking Mai Tais. But retirement for me means that I think for at least the next couple of years, I just want to take time to do things that I enjoy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be tied with money. And if
Yeah.
I do stuff that makes me money, great. But that also means I have the time and the freedom to go pursue stuff that have nothing to do with making money and just things that I want to
Yeah.
try.
Yeah, I mean, I think life is all about being fulfilled and finding your own purpose and finding what's true to you. And oftentimes, I figured like that. Even though you may making a lot of money, money may not be the most fulfilling thing. So I can definitely understand that. And so for you, I'm sure you deal with a lot of people who are seeking financial freedom, including me. I'm looking to be at a place like you one day, and I'm curious, like a lot of people are striving for financial freedom, but they don't even know like the why. And it seems like you're at that point where you've reached that and you're trying and you're now discovering what you really want. Like, what does financial freedom look like for you, and why did you work so hard to achieve it?
Mm. Well, I lately have been taking even the word financial out of it and just freedom.
Mm,
Like what is freedom? And I think a lot of Americans in particular have this kind of misleading belief that once I have this amount of money, then I'll be free, then
yeah.
I'll be happy, then I'll go do all the things. And unfortunately, for some people, they never reach that money. But what's been even more eye-opening for me is that I've met plenty of people now in the last couple of years doing what I do for a living who have plenty enough money to do whatever it is that they want to do. And the sad thing is that they don't have anything that they really want to do.
Yeah.
So I never like understood that. I in the sense of like, I kept saying to myself like, oh, well, you know, once I reach this number, then I'm going to go travel to Asia, or I'm going to learn a new language, or I'm going to like try to become a better singer, like all these things that wouldn't be anything about making money. It would just be about joyful and doing things that I enjoy. But I can't tell you how many rich people I've met that I've asked them, well, why are you unhappy? Why are you unhappy? You have enough money to choose whatever it is that you want to do, and they still perceive like that they're not free. And so, you know, I've changed my view of financial freedom to be just like, what would actually make you feel free?
Yeah.
And turns out for a lot of people, you actually don't need as much money as you think you do.
Oh, yeah.
Free.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I've just had a podcast, and I was speaking to another person who is a millionaire, and he explained that once you have so much money, you become desensitized to it. So it's not as great as you think it is. And so you have all the time in the world, and you have to figure out what you actually really want to do. And it's interesting. And so what is it that makes you feel like free in your eyes, Bernadette?
Unfortunately, I've only figured out what makes me feel free at the times where I felt the least free, which actually has been even more recently. I started doing this business, which is, you know, money coaching and financial education, because I genuinely wanted to help people learn how to get control of their finances and feel more joy in their lives. I think it's serendipitous. Bernadette Joy. But the more I dove into helping people, and people were like, wow, you're actually really good at this. And I got more and more opportunities to, you know, go on podcasts or go on television, write this book, like be a speaker at like these big conferences and stuff. And then before I knew it, I was being pulled in all these different directions. And the reason I started out a business was so that I could have more freedom of time and enjoy myself back in the same position I was like 10 years ago when I quit my corporate job. I was just like, this is the fact that I wake up in the morning some days and I'm just like, wow, my calendar is being completely ruled by other people again. And this time it was to go do stuff that I really thought I enjoyed doing. But at the end of the day, I felt like my heart isn't coaching people, and it got far away from me. So and then if you go in the coaching space in personal finance, it's very fascinating. There's a lot of people who are billed as coaches who really don't have the skill sets to be a coach yet. Not that I don't think they would ever be, but they're charging a lot of money for not actually people. And so, you know, I spent the last couple of years really honing those skills. I think I'm a pretty decent coach now. But then I got kind of sideswept into all these other things. And so this last couple of weeks in particular, in June and July, I was traveling so much, which is what I thought I wanted to do. But I was traveling to the point like I wasn't home for weeks at a time, and I was working whenever I was traveling. And so I realized, okay, like it's not just traveling that makes me happy. It's like traveling and actually being able to relax that make me happy. But then I had this thought of like, well, then why can't you just relax at home? Why do you have to go like all the way across like the country or go across the world, like you can relax? So it sounds very simple and very like probably not exciting, but like for me, freedom is just like, okay, I can be at home and not feel like I have to be productive and do things that quote unquote waste time, right? And just be.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say all of this, Bernadette, because it's like I feel like we're in a culture, especially in America, that constantly promotes like productivity, grind, hustle, like and it feels like if you're not doing that, and if you said what you just said, like my goal is to just chill and relax, people are like, wow, where is the excitement in that? Or like, why do that? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like some people start to judge you, especially when you created such a powerful brand where you look so powerful and everyone is like looking to you to do this coaching. And so I'm curious, like, from you're talking about finding your sense of peace, which you're starting to realize comes from traveling and relaxing. uh what else brings you fulfillment? Because I know you've been coaching for a while, and one thing that I did find interesting about you is you coach a lot of women and a lot of women of color about their finances, which I thought was very cool and interesting. Do you get fulfillment from that? And if so, what about that makes you fulfilled?
I would say right now that I'm equally fulfilled and
Okay.
frustrated
Okay.
with coaching, particularly women of color. And here's why. I'm feeling being very transparent today, right?
Yeah.
That absolutely there is racism. Absolutely, there is sexism. Absolutely, there are a lot of barriers that particularly women of color have to overcome in order to achieve like baseline, even financial
Sure.
security, right? Let alone financial freedom. But what I often find, I was even just having this conversation with two of my clients today, where women are like discounting themselves and pulling themselves out of the race before anyone else
Hmm.
gets their way. And so, like, for example, like I will have clients who won't apply for that job or won't apply for that speaker
Wow.
because they're like, oh, because I'm not qualified yet. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, girl, you cannot, there will be no movement
If you're
if
not
we're
doing
not
it.
in the race, if we're not even, we don't even enter, right? And so a lot of the time, I'm equally frustrated and also empathetic to the fact that the reason that often many women of color react that way is because somewhere along the line they were told that they were not good enough, or that if they made a mistake, that they would be berated for it. And so there's this fear. And
Mm.
so, like for myself, the best thing that I don't know how else to explain this to folks is like there is no way to avoid looking like a fool if you want to become financially independent. If you want to reach financial freedom, you have to be looking
Mm.
like a fool at some point. That could mean, applying for a job and getting rejected. That could mean asking
Sure.
for a raise and being told no. It could be applying for that speaking gig and then laughing in your face. It could be, like for me, investing in things that I didn't fully understand and then losing that money. And there is such a fear of looking stupid or looking like a fool that people end up being their own barrier before
Mm.
even in their way.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I'm curious, do you feel like women have a fear of rejection or like looking more embarrassed? Like, do you feel like that's like a constant theme in your like practice when you're talking to women or just people in general that prevents them from getting their greatest, being a better person and getting more opportunities?
I mean, I think every human being doesn't like being rejected for
Yeah,
sure. I think where it's exasperated for women of color specifically is because
sure.
we're already statistically behind. So
Hmm.
what I mean by that, right, is just like, you see the stats of every about the wage gap, right?
Yeah.
Women of color are earning less than, men and then white men, right? But if you look at the wealth gap, it's even worse. Like
Yeah.
the last statistic I saw was like, women of color have like 36% of what men have in terms of wealth. And
Wow.
so in some regards, I feel that, and I've felt this personally, so I can't speak to every
Sure.
woman's experience, but there's been times where I feel like I'm already behind, so I can't screw this up.
Sure.
So rather than try, I would rather not fail, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so then you end up not trying at all, which is like a guaranteed failure. So I really, lately, I've been practicing, and this is what I hope to do in early retirement. And I had this light bulb moment a couple of weeks ago where
Mhm.
I realized with the wealth that I've been able to build, with the things that I've learned and the skills that I've created for myself, I have a certain level of privilege now that most people might not have. And so let me practice being fearful. Let me practice doing some of the things that scare me and most other people and show people like, hey, you won't die. Like things will still be okay. And if I'm afraid to do these things, given the level of financial security that I have, and I can only imagine how much scarier it is for women who don't have this. And so the best thing I figured out to do is like, I gotta try some of these things myself and show people, like what are the possibilities? Because it's hard to imagine what life can look like if you take those risks if you've never seen it before.
Sure. Sure. And I've noticed that I'm sure you must have went through a lot of imposter syndrome and doubt and overcoming limiting beliefs to get where you are. Do you mind sharing stories of that? Or
Yes, and that I was in denial for a long time
yeah.
that I had any sort of imposter syndrome. Like, no, not me. Everyone else has imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm still doing stuff. I'm still, like in a short amount of time to, humble brag on myself. I was able to create this business in
Yeah.
2020, able to launch a podcast, launch a book, like launch a 6-figure business, like become a millionaire, become different. Like there's all these things. It's like, wow, she knows what she's doing. But secretly inside, I actually don't know what I'm doing. Trying a lot of things, and some things stick, and then
I just
people do
don't.
the
Yeah.
vast majority of things that don't. And so, I'll just give a kind of a prime example is, one of my bucket list goals has always been to be like a professional speaker, and
Cool.
a lot of people have told me that I would be great on stage and that I should do a TED talk and all of that. And I got rejected from TED twice.
Wow.
And this was after I had already become a paid speaker, was booking keynotes, was, making several, $100,000 in my business, and I was getting rejected. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, I just must not be good enough. I just must not be there yet. And then actually in July, I did my first TED talk in Houston, and it was odd because I actually didn't feel nervous at all. And I didn't feel like I didn't belong there. I had like no imposter syndrome at this TEDx. So I was like, I belong here. I've worked really hard for this, all of that. And so I say that in the sense of like probably all of those years from 2020 specifically up until now was probably my payment of imposter syndrome. I was so glad that I had it earlier on in my career. So by the time I had that moment where I really needed to be confident in myself, like it wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, they like to say your rejection is God's protection, and it seems like you had it at the perfect time. Like, because if you had it earlier, you probably would have been a lot more nervous. I'm curious. I'm really curious because actually one of my goals is I would like to do a TED talk one day. I think that's super cool. How do you how do you even get on TED? Like, it's so cool. Like the platform is so huge. Like how was that process like for you to get on there?
Yeah, so there's TED, which is like the main platform, and there's TEDx. And so when I say I did my first TED
Oh,
talk, it was a
cool.
TEDx talk, right? But like, what I think is interesting is that I guess I'll say this is I made the mistake of trying to create something new and exciting, and that's probably why I got rejected the first 2 times because I was just like throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that someone would like notice it. Versus this time around when I applied for this TED talk, I had done this talk already like so many times, and I had developed it over the last 4 years where what it started out in 2020 and what it is now is completely different. And so I say that in the sense of, I don't know that there's, and maybe there is, I have no idea. I have no stats to prove this, but I don't know that there's many people who are good TED Talks that actually just landed it on their first try and had a completely fresh talk that like they've never done before. A lot of the people that I have personally known to do TED Talks have like have built that material over
That makes
years.
sense.
Yeah. Right? So, I would tell anyone who's interested in doing any sort of talk like that, where you want to have a kind of big idea, which is what it says, is that you're not just going to have a big idea today and then like pitch it tomorrow and then get a TED talk. Like that's not a great idea in my opinion. There's very few ideas that have had zero iteration, have had zero practice or whatever. And so I would say, most people from what I've heard, they take at least a year to build something that's worth being an idea worth spreading.
Yeah, and so it sounded like your first two attempts, like you were making promises that you couldn't really actually like prove. Whereas the third time, like you had proof that hey, this is what I do. I've been doing this speaking thing for several years, and that kind of probably built a stronger case. That makes sense. What was your TED talk about, and what was the overall experience like?
So the TED Talk is a talk that I've done a lot. It's called Flow Your Worth. And
Yeah.
so I talk about how you can achieve financial independence by these kind of four basic habits. And a lot of people tell you to know your worth and to grow your worth, but can you actually flow it? Can you actually build wealth without stressing yourself out? So I, and that again, like I said, that talk has been iterated 100 times over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
My experience itself from the TED Talk, um, here's what I thought was again super interesting was um, that particular event, and this is why I understand now. If you're going to apply for a TED Talk, like go for events that are going to be like very well organized, have a good reputation, because not all TED events are created equal. And no shade to the people who who ran this event, but they just weren't very organized. It just was very chaotic, and so I honestly there was a point where I felt bad for some of the other speakers because a lot of them were first time speakers
Aw.
or they're being on a stage like this, and they were just so panicked because like they didn't know if the slides were going to be like ready to show. Like when they did run through their slides, there was like all these technical issues. Like there was just a lot of like stuff behind the scenes. And point being is like the whole time I was like, well, I'm fine. Like if you can't run my slides, I'll just do it without it. I've been through it so many times already that it didn't phase me that day.
Yeah.
So literally when people were doing the rehearsal and stuff, I was just like, and again, like it was just chaotic. I just literally went to the organizer. I was like, I'm gonna go back to my room. I'm gonna get dressed. Like I'm ready. Like I'm not nervous about this at all. So I'll see you when the event starts. And I felt surprisingly calm. That was probably the most calm I've ever been at a speaking event. And it was because I felt like, wow, again, all of these times where I've already gone through it before at lower stakes events or events that weren't as kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
brands, right? Like all of those led me up to the point where I was like, I feel confident in my ability to do this at this point. But I don't think I would have said that even a year ago.
Yeah. And so like because of your preparation, it pretty much like decreased the amount of anxiety that you probably would have went through if you weren't as prepared. What I'm curious, what city were you in?
It was in Houston.
Cause yeah, what city? I'm just curious. What city was the TED Talk in? Because usually I guess I don't know much about TED Talks, but the way they're presented, it seems like everything is so organized. So to hear a story of you not having an organized experience is kind of like revealing. You know what I mean? Because the presentation of TED Talks are like, you know how they are. So it's yeah, and I think it's unfortunate, but I think really good influencers and marketers understand the importance of creating the perception that everything is great because it works towards their marketing scheme and it makes whatever they're trying to do more shareable and reach out to more people. But in reality, it's not the case. And for that reason, I try to stay away from social media as much as possible and actually enjoy real life and relationships because that's where the true joy comes from. These conversations or the people that you actually meet, whether it's your family, your friends, your loved ones, that's where the true fulfillment comes from, at least for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what I think is, I'm just even thinking about. I'm not gonna say which conference it was, but there was a conference I went to last year,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's a one point the keynote speaker now is a convicted felon.
Wow.
Was 3 hours late. 3 hours late
To his own event.
to his own speaking event. Did you see that anywhere online? No, like
Yeah.
no one addressed that, right? And so, I say that in the sense of like, I'm being very selective now about where I spend my time. And
Mm.
specifically, if I see things online, like, and it's not to say that people are trying to overtly be
Sure.
specific, but now anytime I see any sort of an event online, I literally take my expectations down by like 50%. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if it looks like this, it's probably like half of that. Like, and
Yeah.
when you ask me what else brings me joy, I love going to concerts. Um,
Cool.
I'm into a lot of different types of music, and just like I can say, some of the concerts I've been to, like it lived up to what you saw online, but there's also
Sure.
concerts that who are just like they just had a different angle. Like there was literally nobody back there. I don't know
Sure.
trying to make it look full, right? So, you know, I say that, and I think this is where it ties into like your podcast and inspiring. Is like if the only place of inspiration you have is on the internet, that's not a good practice. You need to have inspiration in
Mm.
real life with real people, with real relationships and real communication with like eyeball to eyeball, not just what you see online because it's not true.
Hmm.
Most of it is
Yeah.
just
Yeah, and I love that. I'm really big on inspiration, hence the name Ike Inspiration, and I am very intentional about creating things that will constantly inspire me, whether it's my podcast or the other activities that I'm doing. What are relationships in your life that inspire you? Or keep you pushing forward?
um so there's kind of there's different buckets I have that I prioritize. You can even see them on my calendar. So there's health, there's wealth,
Cool.
there is growth, and then there is relationships. And I have them color coded. So on my calendar, it has to be one of those four things. Is this going to help my wealth, my health, my growth, like me being a better
Cool.
person, or relationships? And I would say that um, right now, I'm most inspired by people who are prioritizing their health. Um,
Okay.
I actually think it's easier to get your money in order than to get your health in order for me,
Hmm.
because money, there's like, you can like measure it so easily if you
Sure.
have it or not. Whereas like health, like I can look thin, but still be very unhealthy.
Yeah.
Uh, and a lot of times you don't know what actually is going on underneath that. So lately, I've been inspired by people who do simple things like exercise regularly and don't eat sugar every day because I'm terrible at that. And that's where I need the most inspiration right now for me is
Cool.
skills.
That's awesome. I love that you mentioned that. They say health is wealth, and I can go on and on about that. But I've had my fair battles with health. I had pneumonia when I was younger. I had acute
Mm,
chest syndrome, and I almost nearly died at a young age due to health disparities and health complications. So I feel like I have a better relationship with health than most people because I just feel happy to be alive.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
Like to
Seriously.
feel like you could almost lose it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you have near death experiences, I feel like it warps what you appreciate. And for me, I like that you mentioned that. When I start to think about what's a perfect day in my life, I know it's so simple, but for me, it's literally I've been being more intentional about going out for walks. And just going out for walks, I don't know why, but I'm like just walking out for like 15, 20 minutes. And I love it. Like, especially when I listen to music. I'm just like you mentioned about, oh, you love music, and I love music too. I'm a DJ too, so I play hip hop, R&B, and I listen to music, go out for walks, and it brings a lot of joy and fulfillment in my life. So I'm glad to hear you doing the same because I'm also been very intentional about my health, very intentional by working out and walking daily. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this is like I have a long way to go in terms of my health journey. I'm not at all where I want to be. And when I say that, meaning just like feeling like my body can do the things it
Sure.
needs to do. I actually decided for the next couple of months that I'm going to kind of scale back on my business so that I can focus
Okay.
on, yeah, I'm gonna focus on ramping up my stamina because I went to, like I mentioned this past summer, I had a big speaking engagement in New York City. Then I went to Houston for this TED Talk. Then I went to and in between, and then I had like a speaking engagement in Reno, and like I was so physically exhausted from that.
Wow.
And you're thinking like, well, why would you be tired? You're just like on planes and then like and talking. Like, why would that be exhausting? But I was
Yeah.
just physically drained, and I realized if I want to keep doing this type of work, being in front of
Sustainably.
people, I I have to figure out how to maintain my energy and to like
Mhm.
eat cleaner because whenever I travel to, I ended up eating like trash and like all, and it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse
Yeah,
because I
you're
know
being honest. You're being honest.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm really focused on. But I will say this is where I think there's this balance between like inspiration and again like reality here is a lot of people will again look at my quote unquote success and say, wow, you're such an inspiration. I'm like, no, I have like and I say no in meaning like a lot of the things that I did was at the sacrifice of like my health and
Mm.
I don't think that's right. And so I just want people to like know both sides of it. Not to say that like not to downplay any things that I've achieved,
Sure.
but it was at a cost. It was at a cost, and now I'm trying to recoup that cost. And I would rather people slow roll it a little bit more and not sacrifice their health along the way.
I love everything you're saying, and it sounds like what you're looking for is balance, essentially. Like I've noticed you mentioned like four different aspects of your thing: health, wealth, relationships, and then I forgot another one. But sorry.
Growth.
And growth, yeah, and you're essentially seeking balance through all those, and I think it's great that you're intentional about that because I feel like too much of one can lead to the downfall of others, and I'm glad that you mentioned being intentional with relationships because I'm only 29, but I speak to older people, and one thing I've learned is like because once you become older, it makes it's become once you become an adult, it's harder to make friends, like a genuine friends. And I've noticed that older people keep talking about how they lose their friendships because life happens, whatever, like people grow out of, people have different intentions. And that's also something I've been very intentional about, like maintaining my relationships, because I don't want to be that person in my 30s or 40s who look back and I don't have any friends even if I have all the money in the world, so yeah.
Yeah, I I'll say this is that again in my wealth building journey, I don't want to say that I sacrifice relationships per se, but I definitely prioritize certain engagements over like social activities sometimes,
Sure.
which I have to do. But now I'm in this. This is what I think is interesting. Is now I'm in this phase where I am alongside with my health. This is could not be a more perfectly timed conversation. But this past weekend, I was catching up with my girlfriends who I've known for almost 20 years now, and I'm the
Wow.
only one that doesn't live in. They all live in New York City, and I'm the only one who doesn't. And so
Okay.
it takes a lot. It takes not a lot extra effort for me to meet up with them because I don't physically live in the same city as them.
Yeah.
And and so literally right where after we're getting off of this podcast episode, I am going to like rearrange my calendar and try to figure out when I can like meet up with them and when I can
Cool.
time. But money would have been an excuse a long time before
Oh wow.
because to travel to New York City however many times a year is not cheap. But
Yeah.
I had to be faced with the reality more recently of like honestly money is not an issue, right? Like
Yeah.
not as much of a consideration for me right now. So now it's just a matter of do I actually care enough to prioritize this? That's really my
Sure.
and I can't. And again, this is like my worst nightmare, which is what you just said, which is I'm going to have all the money that I need and have nobody
Yeah.
who genuinely cares about me. Like that would be that's
Yeah.
really sad, right? And so, and I hate to say this, but again, I've met a lot of rich people who are incredibly lonely
Aw.
because they prioritized making money over making memories, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason that I'm planning to quote unquote retire next year, or at least take an extended
Gotcha.
break,
Yeah.
is to just go like I already told my niece, I mean my nephew who's 10, who just turned 10, like next summer. I was like, you better prepare because me and your uncle are gonna basically abduct you and like take you around for the summer when he after he finishes school. And he lives in a different city from us too. Like all of our family lives in a different city from us. And so I'm already like making plans for next year of like, hey, just a heads up, like I'm gonna come see you. I'm gonna come hang out with you. Like
Aw.
we're gonna actually spend time together. But again,
Yeah.
it would have been an easy excuse to save money. All
Yeah.
I had to do is
Yeah.
I can't afford it. So now it's a matter of priority.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like when people do that, they're putting a mask like to hide their true selves. Like you're using that as like some type of barrier that's quite frankly pretty fake, and it's just it's very interesting because honestly, I started this podcast. I'm talking to very successful people, including you and millionaires, expecting to talk about entrepreneurship, and I love entrepreneurship. I don't mind talking about it and marketing and sales and all that. But I'm kind of going into these conversations, and it's becoming a theme that like a lot of y'all don't really care. Like, I mean, not like you don't care, but you rather talk about something else or talking something about that's more true to your spirit. I don't know. It seems like you're the case too, right? And where did that transition come from? Like money, 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 money always being your thing to now like kind of being more intentional about how you spend your time with others and your loved ones.
I think I'm still in the process of it right now. I'm still unwinding it. There was, there was a point, and this is the danger of like being so focused on just finances, is that you could take this with any goal, right? It's like, oh, once I reach that, then I'll be happy.
Sure.
But then what do most people end up doing? They reach it and then they just move the goalpost.
Yeah.
Right? So I kept moving the goalpost.
Wow.
I said at one point, I was like, oh, once we hit 900,000, because at the time that was what our like financial independence number would have been. Once I hit 900,000, then I'm going to slow down. And then I was like, oh, but I got here faster. So let me try 1.2. Let me try 1.5.
Why not? Yeah.
And why not, right?
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the way, I was just like, okay, so really, Bernadette, really? Like, I don't think there is a number that you're going to just say, now I'm going to be happy. Like, why don't you just try to be happy now?
Yeah.
That actually happened for me. Like, there's no like one major moment. It was just this compilation of things over the last year in particular where, I was choosing building my business over my health and my relationships. And I just was like, no, like that's not, I'm glad that I recognized it early enough that I could kind of reverse the habits relatively quickly compared to, I again have clients who've been working in their 50s and their 60s and they're like, they can't stop working. They literally like, they say, I don't know what I would do if I didn't work. And I'm like, I don't know, hang out with your grandkids, like go like ride motorcycles, like read books. Like, there's like 1,000 things you can do than working, but they can't even fathom it because they're so ingrained by that. And I was like, I don't want to be that person who's so ingrained in working that I forgot what it was like to have fun.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because one of the things I love about this podcast is I'm so curious to see what drives successful people to do what they want, and it's always weird to me when if someone comes on here or just in general someone speaks about their goals. And when I'm asking why are you so keen on making money, like or why are you in your 9 to 5 job, like people can't really intentionally explain what they're doing. It's kind of like, oh, this is just how it goes. Like I'm just here because everyone else does it, and it's kind of weird that I feel like a lot of people don't even question that the work habits or why they're working so much, And so I'm glad that you're being more intentional about that.
Yeah. I think I feel like if now I'm just projecting onto you, it's just like if you just asked everyone point blank on your podcast, are you happy? I don't know that a lot of people would be able to. I don't know.
I probably
people. I don't know, but the vast majority of people I talk to, like if you really ask them, well, are you happy? Oh yeah, I'm totally happy. Well, what exactly makes you so happy? Like, I don't know that a lot of people time on it, and maybe they are happy, but they just haven't figured out why they're happy. Yeah. But I think that for me, I realized that just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I have to monetize it, and just because something doesn't mean I have to do it all the time or make it my whole life's purpose. And there are a lot of things that I like to do that I will never be the best at, that I'll never be able to monetize. Like I love to dance, I love to sing, like Beyonce. No, absolutely not. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it just because I won't be the best at it. And there's a lot of this mentality that I feel like has gotten very out of hand, especially again because of social media. Like people don't want to, again, like it all comes back to people don't want to look stupid. People don't want to look foolish, even though they're happy.
Yeah,
and just for me as like a small example, it's just like I started going back to hip hop classes like
Oh,
last
that's
year.
awesome. I love hip hop. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going pretty regularly. But then at like every class, I always felt pressure to like record myself because everyone else was recording it, and then also the teacher would record it, and then it would also feel this pressure like, oh, you have to like get it right during this class. And I'm just like, wait a minute, I'm not a professional. This choreography to me literally less than half an hour ago, and now you're expecting for me to like do it and do it well. And so I start to get this anxiety around hip hop class, and I was like, oh my god, this is so stupid that I'm like, actually anxiety from going to class. That makes no sense. So I finally just, I could say, oh, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to record. I'm like, or I could just go and just do my best, and know that I'm not a professional dancer, and that's not the point. The point is for me to go because I like moving my body, I like the music, I like hanging out with other people who like the music. That should be the main reason. And so, like, if you get recorded and you look stupid, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah. And from time on, I'm beginning to understand that a lot of people want to be appreciated more for who they are, not necessarily for what they do. And someone told me, like, we're human beings, we're not human doings, like we're not just always doing stuff. And it sounds like you're at a place where that's where you want to be. So I'm gonna put you on the point, on the spot, and ask you the question: are you happy? And if so, what makes you happy? And if you're not happy, well, why isn't that the case?
I think of happiness as a scale. So
Sure.
I would say right now in this moment, I would say I'm probably a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
So like a little higher than average, but I'm not like a 10 out of 10 today. And I
Yeah.
think what makes me happy is that I have started to take more control over my calendar. Um,
Nice.
so like I, went through all my meetings this week, and I'm like, unless this is like a meeting I really want to be at, then I'm gonna decline. Like, I looked at the meeting with you, and I was like, you know what? Kudos to Ike for shooting a shot and asking me to do the podcast, and like all the work.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And I also wish that when I had first started my podcast like years ago, that people would say yes to me, even though like I might not be
Oh.
famous or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, I was like, I'm happy to do this podcast, right? So things
Thank
like
you.
this make me really happy. But where I definitely have some work to do is I haven't. So anything social related or relationship related is coded purple on my calendar, and there's not
Interesting.
enough purple. There's just not enough purple on my calendar. So I
Oh.
top of that. So I literally need to start texting people today and be like, hey, I've been out of town for like 6 weeks. Like I'm back. Like let's hang out. I think I would get up to probably an 8
I
if I just did one
and
thing.
I love that we're actually talking about this, because we're essentially talking about creating the life that we want for ourselves. And I'm glad that you mentioned the calendar, because I have a calendar, and I feel so stupid that I just started using this a year ago. But I just started using this calendar, and it's like a game changer, because I can kind of literally like visualize how my day and week is gonna be. And just like you prioritize like certain things like health, wealth, growth, I'm doing the same thing, and like I get to put that in the calendar and see it. So like for me, I know like every Sunday, I call at least 2 friends just to catch up. You know what I'm saying? And like it's kind of cool that you said you color code it based on what's important to you. I should probably do that with help and whatnot. But yeah, I think it's cool that you're creating, like you're intentional about your calendar and making it more exciting.
I'm crazy about my calendar because the biggest thing that I hear from coaching clients as to why they haven't gotten their money in order or why they are a financial mess is because they say they don't have time. But then
Mm,
what I do with a lot of my clients is I force them to show me their calendar, and I'm like, well, duh, no wonder you have no time because you're prioritizing stuff that doesn't
doesn't
help you.
matter. Yeah.
Like, why are you going to this party if you don't even like the people who are hosting it? Like, why are you going to this meeting if there's no agenda, right? So
Sure.
like I got color coding just these 4 colors. Like health is green.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, health is green. Wealth is blue. Yellow is growth, and then relationships are purple. And just by seeing the colors, I can tell where I'm off balance. Like you'll just
Mm,
look.
that's
Oh, there's no
cool.
purple, so that's not good. Or there's too much blue this week, so you need to have a little bit more green, right? Like so,
Wow.
it's a lot easier for me to manage my calendar when I can visually see that. And then the other thing that's been really helpful with the calendar and helping me kind of chill
Yeah.
out that if I see too many colors in one day, that's not good either. Like then, because then you're switching between different types of tasks like too much, and then you just get physically tired. So I try
Yeah.
to not. And then if I have colors that are like, if it's like a yellow meaning here and a yellow meaning here and a yellow meaning here, and then like blue in between, like I try to like bunch them up instead of having them spread out all during the day, so that I'm not switching back and forth between my different kind of type of energy.
Yeah. I like that you're intentional about the colors. I think I should be a little more intentional. My colors are like, oh, I just want everything to be colorful, but I probably should be more like you and do that because I think it's cool to be intentional like that. It's very interesting how like we can look at our calendar and if we have too much, like that's kind of stressful. Because same thing with me. I notice sometimes on Mondays I might have too much meetings, and I'm like, oh god, like I don't want to, I don't want to do all these meetings, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I have to cut it out. But then if I look at my calendar and there's not much going on too, I don't know. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. But it's interesting. Like I know how you feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I also think that, and I just noticed this as a pattern, the vast majority, everyone that I worked with who had money issues also had time management issues. Like they go,
Oh, yeah, it goes in hand because, like they say, time is money. And
that's
so, if
right.
you're not using your time right, yeah, you're probably not making that money. All right. So, we talked a lot, and I'm curious. I'm curious. What are three things you can't live without, and why? What are three things off the top of your head that you Bernadette won't be able to live with?
I haven't been asked that. Um, as of today, because my answers always change, it would be chocolate. I've tried to give up chocolate. It doesn't work. So chocolate would be one of them. I would say uh, yoga. I've gotten really, really like it's the only thing that can make me stop my brain
Oh
from
wow.
just going into overdrive. I've gotten into a good habit of going to yoga at least like 3 to 5 times a week. I mean, and this is excluding like people and stuff. I'm gonna like exclude like family or friends
Obviously.
or whatever.
Sure.
Like I'm just thinking of like things. So yoga, chocolate, and I would say I mean music. Like music is just a really
Yeah, music is definitely would be on my list too.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. I noticed. So in the back of your background, you have the book "Crush Your Money Goals."
Yeah.
Kudos to you for creating that. I think that's so awesome and so inspiring. And one day I hope to create my own autobiography. And I'm so excited to write a book because I feel like you just learn so much about yourself and just in general. Well, so I'm curious, what was your process of writing a book like, and what did you learn about yourself from writing this book?
I'll answer the second question first, which is
Sure.
I learned that I'm actually a decent writer. I always said
Nice.
that I was a good writer, and now I'm actually okay at it. I don't think I'm great at it, but I think I'm above average.
Yeah.
I think that um, I realize that writing needs to be a bigger part of my overall content strategy. I think that actually the biggest thought leaders, the ones that I respect very much in personal finance, but just generally speaking, all are really good writers.
Hmm.
Um, and then in terms of process, it was I would say I had a little bit of a different journey than from what I've heard my other peers have had. A lot of my peers in the personal finance space like an agent or a coach to help them like write the book or write the
Yeah.
book, all that stuff, and you pay them a certain percentage, and they like
Yeah.
walk you through all this stuff. And I had a publishing company reach out to me. They had seen me on the FinCon website, which is a conference for personal finance folks. And they asked me, they said, there's this book that we want to be written. It's about money habits. Are you interested in it? And at first I told them no. I was just like, well, first of all, I thought it was fake. So then once I realized it was, I looked them up. I'm like, oh, this is a real like this is a big publisher too. Like, okay, this
Sure.
might be real. I told them no initially because I had been pitched about doing a book before, but it was going to be more of like a self-publishing route, and it just turned out to just not be a good experience. And so I was like, I'll never write a book. I never want to do that again. And then when I talked with them, we kind of came to an agreement as to the type of book that I would want to write, which was more around crush your money goals and the habits. Originally, they wanted me to write 100 habits. And I said, absolutely not. First of all, no one's going to read 100 habits. Like, nor should
Or
anyone.
implement them.
And implement them, right? So I was just like, I'll compromise. I wanted to write 10. They said 20. We compromised at 25. And I'm really proud of the ones that I wrote in there. And so the biggest thing that I learned from writing the book was that I was very keen on writing a book only on habits that I personally already do myself.
Sure.
I mean, anyone could write 100 habits and just like say, this would be good if you did this, but do you actually do it? So
Sure.
I learned that I have a high sense of accountability for myself where I'm like, I'm only going to recommend things or write things if I actually have achieved them myself and then they've actually made a difference in my life. And that was so much self-reflection in the best way. So the book, if nothing else, was a really great way to hold myself accountable, to say, if this is something I'm going to recommend for someone else to do that would help them not only their personal finances, but their life, it should be something that I practice, not just preach.
Sure. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And so you mentioned the book has 25 habits, and we're clearly not going to go over all 25 habits. But if you had to pick the top 3 habits that you feel like listeners would benefit from, what are they?
First one that I talk about is like just making negotiation a habit for pay specifically, just negotiate every single time, no matter what. Even if you know you're not going to get it, just do it. and so I give some specific tips on how you would negotiate a pay raise, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're like working for someone. The second one is my favorite. It's the dollar rule, which is I only buy something if it's going to cost me $1 per use. So like this dress I bought, actually, it was like $50. And I was like, I will wear this 50 times. And I've already worn it like 5 times since I bought it. And it was only like a couple weeks ago. And then the third one that I would say that I think seems to have generated a lot of interest from people is what I call screenless Sundays, where on Sundays I just literally, I lock my phone in my glove compartment of my car, and I don't watch TV, and I don't do anything. I don't do anything screen related, and I just like force myself to live in like the normal world. So my husband and I, yesterday, actually, since yesterday was Sunday, we went hiking. Like you said, we love walking and stuff too. And then we went to we found a random lake that we never been to before, so we hung out there for a while, and then we played board games, and then we did like a couples exercise together. And so I find that on screenless Sundays, time moves really slow in a really nice way. It also is a great reset for like your finances. And like you said, like just having one day a week where you're just not bombarded with ads and what other people are doing. It's so great for your brain.
Wow, I like that. Screenless Sundays. That's very memorable. And it's easy to remember too. And I think that's, that's a good one, and I can see that bringing a lot of joy and fulfillment and I like to rest on Sundays, and I think a lot of people like to rest on Sundays, so that makes sense, and businesses are closed, so it's like the best time to do it. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna think about implementing that one. I on Sundays I call my friends, and I like that too. That's pretty fun. And so I'm curious to hear like just overall Bernadette, with your life story and all the work that you're doing, what is the ultimate goal? Do you have a goal, or like what's the ultimate goal with the coaching businesses you have and all the work that you're doing, and like just your relationship?
If you had asked me this question a year ago, I'd have been like, oh, my goal is to help create $1 billion of wealth, for 1,000 new individuals. Like that was literally the goal that was on my business plan a year ago. And my thought was I would help 1,000 people become millionaires, which would create $1 billion of wealth, like in the hands of good people. That's like what the original thought was.
Sure.
But, I would say I don't have a clear goal right now because not that I let go of that goal. It's more so like that was like, I felt like I was saying that just because it sounded cool and it sounded like something I should say. And my goal right now is like on a deeper level. I have a current roster of about 50 clients, and I just want them to feel like they can be themselves. And that sounds very, very like broad and not very specific, but I just have so many clients right now who feel like they would not be able to show up at their job or with their friends
Oh,
or in their business as their like real self because of former.
yeah.
And that's just really what's been on my heart lately. It's just like I
I
want
think
these people to just be themselves.
yeah. I think that's a very honorable goal, and yeah, it's sad to hear that. And time in from time out, I come across many people where I feel like they're not being themselves. And when you ask that question, like, "Hey, are you really happy?" I feel like part of that is like, are you really being yourself? Because I feel like when you're removing yourself from like who you are, that's when the anxiety, the depression comes because you're not being true to who you are. So I think that's a more authentic goal, and hopefully, I hope you can make that happen through your coaching. I'm curious, like, does your coaching help? Like, what does coaching look like for you? And like, what's your coaching style? How do you help others like overcome their trials and tribulations?
Sure. Oh, well, this has to be my last question because I have a coaching call right
Oh,
after
okay,
this.
okay, okay, sorry, yeah,
But I will say is so coaching with me right now. It's pretty straightforward. You can sign up for my boot camp. It's 90 days, and you get like I said, I've laid out kind of the specifics of what a financial plan would look like if you wanted to achieve um, freedom like I have. And through that 90 days, you get, I'll answer questions from you at any point in time when you are going through the material. Then we also have group sessions where I will tackle some of the questions that I see across multiple people. And it's always helpful to hear what other people are doing because then you're like, oh, I didn't think of that question, or I wouldn't have thought
yeah,
to look at it that way. And then you are held accountable if you get through at least 8 of the 12 lessons. Then you and I will sit down, meet one on one, and we will literally go through all of your finances with a fine tooth comb and give you very specific steps on what you should be doing. And so my
wow.
goal is that people would at least have their next $10,000 worth of steps after completing all of that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bernadette, for your time, and thank you for all the wisdom that you have shared. And if people would like to reach out to you or learn more about you, how can they do that?
Sure. I'm at crushyourmoneygoals.com, and you can learn about my program, and you can also learn about I have a podcast as well. It's called Crush Your Money Goals. And if you want to book me for speaking gigs, and my book is there as well. And then on social media, I'm primarily on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and it's at Bernadette Joy.
Thank you, Bernadette, and thank you for your time. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for creating that book. I'm looking forward to purchasing it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Bye.